Hello, and a big welcome to this Inspiring Businesswomen video interview. I am Oliver Peters, the Vice President of Client Relations here at Hydrogen Group. Hydrogen is a global recruitment company providing core STEM markets with business-critical talent. A few years back, our team started a passion project which came out of our determination to visibly increase diverse talent across the industries we operate. Our aim for our Inspiring Businesswomen series has always been to invite different female leaders to share their success stories and experiences so that we can all learn from them. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Jennifer, Amanda, and Linda, the three co-founders of Javara. Among them, they have over 70 years of experience in the clinical research industry, which is one of the many reasons why I can't wait to learn more about their stories. A quick overview of the company. Javara is an integrated research organization providing comprehensive clinical research infrastructure to large healthcare organizations in order to reach broad patient populations with clinical trial options at the point of care. Javara's unique model aims to bridge the gap between pharma and healthcare and transform the clinical trial landscape. Javara is the trusted clinical research partner to over 5,000 physicians and over 5.5 million patients. So, welcome everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Before we get started, can I ask all of you to briefly introduce yourselves to our viewers? Jennifer, let's start with you.
I'm Jennifer Byrne, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Javara.
It's great to be with you. My name is Amanda Wright, and I'm the Vice President of Healthcare Partnerships for Javara.
Hi, Oliver. My name is Linda McCarty, and I am the General Counsel for Javara.
Awesome. And let me just say as well, it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here today, learning more about you ladies and Javara as an organization. Really, really excited to get to know you all a little bit more. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of your time you're giving today. What I'd like to do is to jump in to some questions. We can evolve the conversation from there. As the three founders of Javara, tell me about your vision and what led you to start this company.
Well, Oliver, I'm going to put it in kind of two words to begin with in terms of the vision and the why behind Javara. Two words would be frustration, and second word would be hope. So as a longtime clinical research professional, over the span of my career, I've been narrowly focused in terms of enabling clinical trial participation, really at the point of the patient and the physician, the trusted physician to the patient. And so that's the space, where I've always worked. And the research ecosystem is very broad. There are a number of players, very important, players in the process. And so some people dedicate their careers to working within pharmaceutical companies. Some people dedicate their careers to working in kind of more through channel partnerships. But in my case, I've always worked really in that, kind of hyper-focused way. And I've been in research for many, many years. Today, in today's world, over the decades, there's been so much consolidation and change in the pharmaceutical industry. And simultaneous to that, there's been a lot of change really within the healthcare ecosystem, namely with respect to just consolidation. So decades ago, not nearly as complex, far fewer pharmaceutical companies. The process for clinical research was a bit less cumbersome, perhaps maybe not quite as regulated as it is today. And healthcare, was also very different. Going back just a few decades in the past, research either happened within an academic medical center or it happened in a handful of kind of private practice physician settings. And so over the years, the ability for patients, everyday healthcare consumers to get connected to a clinical trial has become actually more and more challenging despite consolidation, despite technology enablement. Complexity of trials have become more and more difficult. And so in today's world, if you walk into a group of 100 people, and let's say even those 100 people have fairly significant medical conditions, whether it's cancer, chronic disease, only a very small handful of those people would have ever even been offered a clinical trial. So there's this kind of matchmaking process that has become more and more difficult. So that's been the frustration. The frustration is that we need so many more people involved in clinical trials. I mean, right, we're living in a world right now, I think that it's very obvious to everyone. If we didn't have the tens of thousands of people who were ready, willing, and able to participate in COVID-19 vaccine, none of us today would even be in a position to receive a vaccination. So we have a lot of people who might have benefit from clinical trials and very few people who actually are kind of in the right time and place to be offered the clinical trials. That's the frustration. The hope is that from a Javara standpoint, we are really building a business model that, again, really facilitates that. And, bringing forth really an infrastructure and a team of people and partnerships that, again, hopefully put us in the best position to be able to really match the right clinical trial to the right patient and their physician at just the right time. So a lot of things have to come in alignment, but I'm going to kind of leave it as the vision going forward, that we are able to really move that needle, and within the healthcare systems where we're operating, that it is actually more likely that patients within those systems at some point in time are offered a clinical trial when the time might be best and right for them.
I'll actually pick up where I think Jennifer left off, and it really starts for me personally at a very young age. I knew I wanted to work in healthcare. I knew I wanted to care for people. I wanted to do my part to make them better. And while I do believe my career has done this, it took a bit of a non-traditional path in clinical research, but the desire has been a constant. And so to be in this position where we can reimagine clinical research as part of clinical care, and we can bring forth a model, a partnership opportunity that encourages providers to engage with patients and engage in clinical research. It was not just an opportunity, it was a responsibility. We have a relatively low number of providers in the United States that actually participate in clinical trials. And in light of Jennifer's information that she provided in terms of the number of people we need participating, it's extremely important that we do our part to better engage providers. And at this moment in time, we have data that says from patients that 75% of patients indicate that if their provider were to be the one that would say, you might want to consider this clinical trial, they would actually consider it. And given the very few numbers of patients participating in the United States, less than 1% outside of oncology, in lies the responsibility for us to make this come to life.
I certainly agree with both Jennifer and Amanda's comments. Thinking back 3 years ago when we first started Javara, and it's almost 3 years to the day, we were all really committed to creating a new solution and chart new paths. So Javara was never about recreating something that was already out there. And from a business standpoint, this really meant that we had to create a brand new business model and a brand new delivery solution. And from a legal standpoint, where I spend a lot of time, it meant that we had to navigate regulatory and legal frameworks governing two separate industries, healthcare and life sciences, both equally complex and both continuously changing, and kind of finding common alignment between the two. So as we contemplated Javara, this was personally something I was really excited about, to have an opportunity to be part of something new and really reinvent how clinical trials are being conducted in the United States.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, Linda, you've got a nice, easy job on your hands. I feel like bridging the gap there. So, all three of you. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey the last 3 years for you, and yeah, I'm excited to see what the next 3 years and beyond brings for all three of you and the organization, obviously. Lovely. Okay, thank you. How has your career progression led to your current role?
I've been extremely fortunate to have had an opportunity right out of college, actually, to work in clinical research. While it may have been a bit of an accident, like many, most people don't have a plan to go into clinical research. It just happens, and the same was true for me. I was very fortunate early in my career to work with some amazing people, but I feel even more fortunate that I started in a boots on the ground role. I was a clinical research coordinator back in the 90s. I had an opportunity to lead sites, clinical research sites. And these particular experiences, I have to say, I look back on them time and time again, and I learned so much by being in the boots on the ground, being at the point of care, being at the point of actual trial execution. And it was foundational. And I learned a lot about processes, regulations, different roles, different stakeholders, how they all relate. And I draw on those experiences every single day. But I fast forward a few years, and as I said earlier, my interest in healthcare remains. My role today, leading our healthcare partnership activities, really is a perfect intersection point of the last close to 25 years. And I often describe my role as a translator. I'm oftentimes in a position to help clinical research resources within Javara, within our industry as a whole, understand what's happening within the healthcare landscape, to help the healthcare industry understand what is happening within the clinical research, the drug development landscape. How do we bring those two together to find and capitalize on some shared value that comes as a result of this Javara business model? So my job is to continually translate the clinical research as it results from boots on the ground to now our healthcare partners, our healthcare colleagues, to understand what's happening within the landscape of healthcare, and how do these two things continually come together for touch points? How do we continually evaluate doing better, being better for patients, being better for providers, making it easier for patients and providers to engage in clinical research? So I'm in a continual learning mode, especially when it comes to healthcare, but find this to be of tremendous value with respect to our business model and really to address the systemic challenges that we're facing from a drug development standpoint.
Well, to jump in here, I think my path to clinical research is a little bit different than that of Amanda's and some of my other colleagues. So I'm an attorney by training and a little bit of a germaphobe, some would say. And I started my legal career in private practice in 2001, and then really spent the next 11 years working primarily with healthcare organizations and independent research sites, but really as outside counsel. And similar to the landscape today, back then, clinical research for most part existed separate from healthcare. And this was particularly evident to me during mergers and acquisitions, for instance, of healthcare organizations, where research operations, that topic never came up. It was either not addressed at all, or it was carved out from the acquisition altogether. And the physicians kind of continued it as a separate business from the acquiring healthcare organization. So this separation was really problematic from a legal standpoint, since you now had physicians employed by larger healthcare systems, moonlighting with research on the side, signing contracts that could arguably be attributed to the healthcare organizations employing them. And these healthcare organizations really had no oversight and really no knowledge on what was going on. So from a legal standpoint, that's problematic, but also from patient access standpoint, it's similarly problematic because patients, unless they had the fortune to have a healthcare provider that actually was engaged in research, they would not even learn about clinical trials. So as more and more healthcare organizations in the US started to implement electronic health records, access to medical records really became restricted. And you had regulatory frameworks such as HIPAA that all of a sudden had some teeth because now you had audit trails and all of these things going on. So it started to become more and more difficult for providers to conduct research separate and apart from where they worked. That was one of those pivoting moments, I think, in our industry where doors started to close for this kind of cottage industry. So when I left private practice in 2013, I started to work for an independent research site. And I did so with this insight and perspective from a healthcare standpoint that kind of saw the writing on the wall that the way clinical research had traditionally been conducted was probably not sustainable. And it really couldn't be done in silo of clinical care. And it certainly couldn't be done without the knowledge of the healthcare institution. So that's really kind of my background and how I ended up in research. It's really that curiosity from a legal standpoint and bringing two separate industries together and the frameworks behind each.
Very interesting, super interesting. Thank you, Linda.
I'm going to build off of a word that Linda just ended with, and I'm going to focus on curiosity because I think that's been a really important part of my own journey. Much like Amanda, I come again from a really long clinical research career, fell into it right out of college. But I guess really at a high level, as I think about kind of my career progression, I think there are some really predominant themes. And curiosity is certainly, top of mind. I think that, over the years, I started in as entry-level position as you could possibly be. And, found myself in fairly short order because of the business that we're in. I mean, we're in clinical research, which means we're working with patients, and the spectrum in terms of patients is very wide. We work with physicians, highly trained clinical professionals. We work with pharmaceutical companies and, their designates. And so we work with just a broad range of people. And I think what, really helped me very early on in my career was that curiosity element. I was so fascinated all of a sudden to be in an environment where I was able to learn from so many people and such a broad range of people. It might be that, I was learning from, one of the patients that I was taking care of in 1 minute. And the next minute, I was speaking to the medical monitor about, this project and a data lock. And so that I think really served me, well. And I would say, again, kind of at a high level, I think from a career progression standpoint, I still try to be very mindful of continuing to show up as a lifelong learner. And I think that with that orientation, in terms of being a lifelong learner, having curiosity, right, about this very fascinating industry that we have and this extraordinarily important and noble work that we do, I think has really, led to a lot of opportunity that I'm going to say, now as the CEO of this company, this is my second really tenure as a CEO. I mean, I started, kind of 1 foot in front of the other. every day showing up, really leaning in to opportunities, advice that I give to a lot of people who I work with now that I see kind of coming in, maybe where I was not so long ago, or maybe actually it was a very long time ago, is to show up, every day and keep your head down and work really hard, and be curious and see the opportunity to learn from, people around you. And, I think that's just been a really strong element of what the journey has been like for me. So I know that's a little different tack than my colleagues, but I think, just some important concepts that I try to stay really mindful.
Yeah. Really, really articulately said, Jennifer. Thank you. It really, unique. All three of you bring such a variety of experience to the table, but all very poignant and relevant. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Inequality exists in today's workplace in many forms, including gender and race. What do you feel can be done to make improvements in these areas specifically?
Yeah, so this is such an important, topic. And I'm going to say, to quote John Locke, I love this, what worries you masters you. And so I think the starting point in terms of addressing inequality on a lot of levels, I think we need to be worried about it. I think we need to own it, and we need to recognize it, as it is. And so I think that, in terms of what can be done and how we can make improvements, we have to be intentional about it. We have to understand, right, what are the facts? Where do we stand in terms of our own organization? What's important to us? And in clinical research, what is important to us is that a wide and diverse population participate in research. There is a scientific and a medical fact, right? And facts that must be established in terms of safety and effectiveness. So I think for any of those who I'm going to say are so fortunate to participate in this clinical research arena, we must be concerned about this, and we must be intentional about this. And so it does take, focused strategies. We need to understand, what are the unmet needs of the patient populations that we are serving. And we need to understand that there are differences. There are transportation access, there's information, there's the, who the messenger is. We have trust issues in the wider community, right, against pharmaceutical companies. I think we need to be aware of that. We need to be worried about it, and we need to be focused on how we're proactively addressing that.
Yeah, really, really well said. Awareness, right, is a key word I take away from that as well. It's eyes wide open, not eyes closed, right? Absolutely perfect. Yeah, thank you. What are your thoughts on risk taking, and why should leaders learn to become more comfortable taking risks?
Taking risk is really I'll say the courage to recognize there are some uncertainties, to face those uncertainties. While we had a deep belief and commitment, and continue to have that, to bring this organization forward to what we know today as Javara, there are and will be risks. It's a new business. It's a new business model. There were risks in terms of how would the market respond? How would our healthcare organizations as a whole, would they embrace this idea of integrating clinical research with clinical care? We had a tremendous amount of encouragement prior to the launch of Javara, but the reality is every intersection, there are certain risks. Some are greater than others. And I think you have to really be in the mindset to embrace those risks. I think to surround yourself with people who have different talents, have different skills than maybe you do as an individual. That's something we've been very intentional about as an organization, to make sure we have a well-rounded group of people who've come together in this mission, because at every intersection point, there are going to be different challenges, different questions that need to be answered. Having the right people there brings great confidence in your ability to make the right decisions, embrace those risks, and move forward. Who would have thought, when we launched this organization, that we would be launching more or less in the middle of a global pandemic? And while it's, tragic in so many ways, I'm grateful that we chose to take risks. I'm grateful that Javara was in a position to make a difference. Millions of people are now vaccinated because of the work in part that we did as an organization. And, that is something that will never be lost on me. Starting a new business, knowing firsthand now, starting a new business is hard. It's much harder than what I ever expected it to be, but there are risks worth taking. And I would just encourage people that if you believe in something, if you have that idea, don't be lost on it. Make it happen.
It's moving, it's powerful, right? Risk taking is hard, and it can be daunting. But yeah, another prime example of look at yourself, Amanda, and look at Javara as an organization. It's powerful to take risks in that regard sometimes. Inspiring, absolutely. Being a company with many women in leadership positions, what advantages and potential challenges do you experience?
Oh, Oliver, that's a loaded question right there.
It is. I apologize. I have to squeeze one in there, Linda.
Well, I grew up in Sweden, and which is a society where gender inequality is less of an issue. So I think my perception of female versus male leadership may be a little bit different. And I don't necessarily think leadership styles are cemented in gender alone, but instead is really coming out of our own personal experiences, irrespective of gender. So in my career, I've had the opportunity to work with great leaders and also not so great leaders from both genders. And I think as we built Javara, we've been very intentional in terms of building a diverse leadership team. And this is less because it's the right thing to do, but more because we need that different perspective. And we need that in order to effectively innovate in this space, and I would say in any space.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think and you touched on something to start with, that diversity is a huge part of this concept as well, right? And the more diverse that we can perhaps be, the more advantages you're going to gain within that as well. Do you have anything you'd like to expand on there, Linda?
Well, again, it really comes down to for Javara as a company that we have that diversity and background and really to be able to scale this company. And we are very intentional about the members we bring on board to ensure that we have different perspectives, different backgrounds, in order to be able to be innovative and grow as an organization.
I think and I appreciate, Linda's orientation and kind of, her background and perspective on this. I am going to say though, from a female standpoint, I do all that I can with my co-female colleagues. I do think that at times, and I don't want to make a general statement here, but I do think at times, I think there are differences of how women at times will show up versus how men will show up. And, I try to be very intentional about how I show up, and even just words and terminology. I think sometimes women can show up and we can use words maybe in a little softer way. We ask for permission to speak. Oftentimes, I really notice that, especially in the boardroom. You know, it is, I think that there are female characteristics that at times it's about that awareness and just being, you know, I think really dialed into what are we apologizing for? What are we asking permission to speak up? And I do think that those are characteristics in my years of working with women. I think that sometimes that's a bit more of a challenge, definitely to be overcome, but I think it's something to be aware of.
Well said. That's such a, well said. It's such an interesting point that comes up time and time again. And for me, it's about changing little norms, right, in the day-to-day world and the day-to-day working business world as well. And there's different expectations, perhaps, of different genders. And the more we can change that narrative, change that, you know, what normal is, hopefully we can start to, to change that on a broader perspective. And we're getting there, right? I do think we're getting there. I think there's still a long way to go. And yeah, hopefully, you know, the likes of you three individuals are paving the way for others to come. And that's not to say the work is done, but it's moving in the right direction, hopefully. And another element of this, yeah, a few more male advocates is of need as well, right? So well said. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Tell me about your experience with mentorships and how it's shaped your career, perhaps both as a mentee and also as a mentor.
Oliver, I'm a huge believer, big believer in mentorship. I can give you countless examples over the last close to 25 years of where mentorship has undoubtedly shaped somebody's future, and possibly even go as far as saying it's shaped the possibilities with respect to companies. Each one of us sits here today with our own stories, many stories that we could tell about our mentors. I've been very fortunate to have many over the years that have contributed to my career, and ultimately, I would say, even led me to this very position that we're sitting in today, having this conversation 3 years into Javara and doing very meaningful work. So it's something I don't take for granted. It's something that I'm very mindful of now as a leader and how I am providing mentorship or how people around me are receiving mentorship. I think it's important to recognize that even though I may be 20 plus years into my career, I still need a mentor. It comes in different shapes and sizes at times. Sometimes it might be very specific to a part of our business. Sometimes it may be more broad. I strongly encourage leaders that are developing in development to seek out a coach, to think about finding that right person or persons that can help them along the way. It is one of the greatest experiences I've had in my career. And they are able to see things in you that you can't see in yourself at certain moments in time. And I think that is the invaluable lesson that comes with mentorship.
Really well said. I completely agree. It's a powerful tool that can get overlooked sometimes. That really can shape futures. You're absolutely correct. Fantastic. Okay. What is the best bit of advice you would give young women looking to advance their careers?
Gosh, one. You're only giving me one.
Only one. That's it. That's all. That's all I can do. No, I'll stretch it. You can have a few, Jennifer. Just once.
I'm going to give one. I'm going to say it's about showing up with an attitude, and an attitude in terms of opportunity and how to make things happen. So it's more that positive attitude. And early on in your career, right? Sometimes you're starting at, maybe what you feel like is the lowest of the low or the most entry level position, and you're being tasked with something that can seem so mundane, so trivial. Do I really need a college education to be doing this job? And I think it would be adjusting that mindset that, you know, we only have one life to live and we only have so much time. And so if you're going to show up and you're going to be involved in something and you're giving your time, you make the most of it. You take every opportunity as just that. It's not a burden. There's actually an opportunity. And what may on the surface seem, again, mundane and low level is probably a tremendous opportunity. It gets back to that curiosity that we've talked about.
Well said. Yeah, it really does. It really does. Very, very on topic for sure.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think be comfortable with change and really learn from mistakes and failures. You know, we're all going to have those, and it's how we handle those and how we move forward. And I think that is a good lesson for everyone. And work hard, of course. Hard.
So what comes as a result of going last and having worked with these two women for a very long time is I have to pivot because I won't be redundant. But I will say, I think have a deep belief in what you're doing and commit to doing the right thing. You know, I had a former colleague, actually somebody that all three of us have worked with previously. And he once said to me, if you do the right thing, it will eventually be the right thing, and don't give up too soon. So that would be my advice.
Wow, what a strapline, Amanda. Fantastic, yeah. Tenacity, right? And you've all, you've all wrapped that up so nicely as individual points, but also, yeah, all three of you together as an organization. You can tell that you work so well together. Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Jennifer, Linda, and Amanda, thank you so much. I'm going to be signing off. I'm Oliver Peters with the Hydrogen Group, and this has been the three co-founders of Javara. So thank you for tuning in, and thanks for your time.